The scent of decay clung to the stones of the auction block. It was the smell of desperation, of lives sold for a handful of silver coins. Aerith stood with her head bowed, the coarse burlap of her shift scratching her skin. Around her, other Omegas shivered, their fear a palpable wave in the chilly air. They were the unwanted, the flawed, the packless chattel to be haggled over. For them, this was a final, desperate chance. For Aerith, it was an execution. She was different, even among the outcasts. She was a pariah. While the others possessed the soft, yielding nature of their rank, they at least had a wolf slumbering within them. Aerith had only silence. She was wolfless, a hollow shell in a world defined by the spirit within. Her family, the once proud Silvermoons, had cast her out, their shame too great to bear the burden of a broken daughter. They had given her to the auctioneers without a backward glance. Her price, a pittance to cover their travel expenses. Next! The auctioneer boomed, his voice echoing off the damp walls of the market cavern. Lot 17, Aerith, of the disgraced Silvermoon line, wolfless, barren, but she has a pretty face. For those who value such things, let us start the bidding at a single copper. A cruel snicker rippled through the sparse crowd of low-ranking shifters and opportunistic merchants. A single copper. It was less than the price of a loaf of stale bread. No one raised a hand. Aerith closed her eyes, her shame a hot brand on her soul. She had expected this. Who would want a useless thing like her? Her only gift was a secret one, a thing she could not name or explain. It was a deep, quiet well of empathy within her, an ability to feel the pain of others and, in some small way, to soothe it. She could calm a spooked horse with a murmur, quiet a crying infant with a touch. But in a society that revered physical prowess and the ferocity of the wolf, her gentle talent was seen as nothing more than a peasant's trick. It was a soft power in a world of hard edges. The auctioneer was about to dismiss her, to send her to the tanner's pits, where the truly worthless ended their days, when a new presence silenced the cavern. The heavy wooden doors groaned open, and two figures in the obsidian armor of the royal guard stepped inside. Their faces were grim, their armor emblazoned with the roaring wolf of the Alpha King. Between them walked a man whose robes of office marked him as a member of the king's council. He was tall and severe, his face a mask of aristocratic disdain. Aerith recognized him from the public decrees. Lord Aelrican, uncle to the king, and acting regent of the realm. His gaze swept over the pathetic display of Omegas on the block, his lip curling in disgust. By order of the regent, he announced, his voice slicing through the silence, a tribute is required. The king's affliction grows worse. The shadow blight deepens its hold. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Everyone knew of the Alpha King's curse. King Zephyros, the Black Wolf, a hero who had fallen in the Witch Wars only to be brought back by dark magic, was now a prisoner in his own body. A curse twisted his wolf, turning it into a monstrous, uncontrollable beast of shadow and rage. He was isolated in the highest tower of the Blackwood Citadel, his howls of agony a nightly reminder of their sovereign's torment. Lord Aelrican continued, his eyes cold and empty. We have tried healers, sorcerers, and priestesses. All have failed. Now, we try a different path. It is said, the gentle nature of an Omega can soothe even the wildest beast. Therefore, a tribute of soothing has been decreed. An Omega shall be chosen to attend the king, to calm his spirit. His gaze fell upon Aerith. It was a chilling, calculating look. She saw no pity in his eyes, only opportunity. Dozens of Omegas had already been sent to the king's tower. None had returned. They were not tributes. They were sacrifices. You, Aelrican said, pointing a single elegant finger at her. The wolfless one. You are worthless to all others. Perhaps your emptiness will serve the king. You will be this month's tribute. The auctioneer sputtered. My lord, she is defective. Surely a stronger Omega. She is disposable. Aelrican cut him off. If she fails, nothing of value is lost. If, by some miracle, she succeeds, well, miracles are for the desperate. He tossed a single gold coin onto the stage. It spun and landed at Oreth's feet. A stark contrast to the single copper that had been her starting price. Her price is paid. Prepare her. The guards moved forward, their gauntlets closing around her thin arms. Fear, cold and sharp, finally pierced through Oreth's numb resignation. She was being sent to die, to be torn apart by the monster who was once their king. As they dragged her from the block, she looked back at the crowd. No one met her eyes. To them, she was already dead. She was a forgotten Omega, a wolfless girl, sent to soothe a cursed king whose soul had already been devoured by shadows. The Blackwood Citadel was a fortress of jagged stone and perpetual shadow, a place that seemed to swallow the light. Oreth was escorted through cold, echoing halls, where tapestries depicting the glorious victories of King Zephyros hung like mocking ghosts. They showed a king with eyes like polished obsidian and a warrior's smile. Not the tormented creature he had become, the guard's footsteps were the only sound. A rhythmic march toward her doom. They ascended a winding staircase that seemed to climb into the very heavens. The air grew colder, charged with a raw, oppressive energy that made the hairs on her arms stand up. It was an aura of pure, undiluted agony. Her own empathic senses screamed at her, a silent shriek of torment that was not her own. This was his pain. This was the shadow blight. The guards stopped before a massive iron-bound door. Heavy chains were draped across it, secured with locks that looked as if they could hold back a siege engine. One of the guards produced a key, his hand trembling slightly as he undid the locks. His Majesty is unwell today, the guard mumbled, refusing to look at her. Do not make any sudden movements. Do not speak unless spoken to, and by the goddess, do not touch him. He pushed the door open, and the wave of suffering that washed over Oreth nearly brought her to her knees. The room beyond was vast and opulent, but it was a cage of ruined splendor. Furniture was splintered and overturned, deep claw marks, impossibly large, scarred the stone walls and floor. The air was thick with the metallic tang of blood and the bitter scent of despair. And in the center of the room, he was there. King Zephyros was a giant, even when kneeling. He was bound to the floor by thick, silver chains that strained against his every ragged breath. His back was to her, his massive frame hunched in misery. His long, black hair was matted with sweat and something darker. His skin, where she could see it, was pale and etched with writhing, black veins that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. This was the curse, the shadow blight, made manifest. He did not turn. His voice was a low growl, a rumble that vibrated through the stone floor. Another one? Aelrican grows more foolish with each passing moon. Leave, little Omega. Run while you still can. There is no king here, only a beast. Oreth's heart hammered against her ribs. Every instinct screamed for her to flee, to obey the guard's advice and the king's own command. But her feet remained rooted to the spot. Beneath the crushing weight of his power and rage, her strange gift showed her something else. She could feel the sliver of the man still trapped inside the monster, a soul screaming in a prison of his own flesh. The pain was a physical thing, a shard of ice in her own heart. She took a hesitant step forward. The chains rattled as he shifted, his head slowly turning. She saw his profile first, a sharp, aristocratic jaw clenched in a permanent snarl, a brow furrowed in eternal torment. Then he faced her fully, and she forgot how to breathe. He was beautiful, in a terrifying, broken way. His face was all harsh angles and savage grace, but his eyes were the heart of the storm. One was a deep, intelligent gray, the eye of a king. The other glowed with a malevolent crimson light, the eye of the beast. The shadow veins pulsed more violently on that side of his face, a creeping corruption that sought to claim him completely. "You are not afraid," he murmured, his voice laced with a dangerous curiosity. It was not a question. The others screamed. They wept. They begged. "You just stare." Areth found her voice, though it was little more than a whisper. "Fear is a luxury, Your Majesty. I was sold for less than a loaf of bread. There is little left for me to be afraid of." A flicker of something surprise? Interest? Crossed his features. The red glow in his eye dimmed for a fraction of a second. "Wolfless," he stated, his gaze piercing. He could scent it on her, the blank space where her wolf should have been. "My uncle sends me a broken toy to play with." "How fitting." The guard slammed the door shut behind her, the locks clicking into place with grim finality. She was trapped. Trapped with the monster. "I am not a toy," she said, a spark of defiance igniting within her. She had nothing left to lose. "I am Areth." He let out a short, harsh laugh that sounded like grinding stone. "You have a name. It will not save you." He strained against his chains, the muscles in his arms and back cording like steel cables. A low growl escaped his throat, and the shadowy tendrils under his skin writhed and darkened. The agony was intensifying. "The blight is rising. Get to the far corner of the room. Press yourself against the wall. Do not move. Do not even breathe too loudly. If you are lucky, it will not notice you when it takes me." He threw his head back and roared, a sound of such profound agony that Areth felt it crack her own bones. It was the sound of a soul being ripped apart. The beast was coming. She should have been terrified, but all she felt was an overwhelming, heartbreaking wave of compassion for the suffering king. Areth did not retreat to the corner. She stood her ground, her body trembling but her will a sudden unshakable pillar of steel. Watching him fight, watching him suffer for her potential safety, struck a chord deep within her. He was a king, even in chains, even as a monster. The shadowy veins on his body pulsed with a sickening rhythm, spreading like ink in water. His form began to distort, muscles swelling, bones cracking, and reshaping under the force of the malevolent magic. His screams became inhuman snarls. The beast was winning. Instead of hiding, Areth took another step closer. "What are you doing, you little fool?" Zephyros snarled, his voice distorting, deepening. He was on all fours now, the transformation almost complete. "I told you to hide." "You are still in there," she whispered, her voice barely audible over his pained growls. "I can feel you." Her own senses were on fire. The agony pouring off him was a physical assault. But through it, she felt the core of the man, the desperate, clawing will to survive, to protect, to remain himself. It was a tiny flicker of light in an overwhelming darkness. She focused on it. Without thinking, she began to speak. She spoke of the sun on the fields of her old home, of the taste of wild berries picked in the summer, of the lullabies her mother used to sing before the shame had turned her heart to stone. She did not tell a grand story. She offered him small, simple pieces of a life he could no longer touch. Her voice was soft, a quiet thread in the cacophony of his torment. She did not know if he could even hear her, But she kept speaking, pouring her own desperate hope into the words. The beast's rampage seemed to falter. The violent thrashing against the chains lessened. Zephyros, or what was left of him, lifted his monstrous head. His eyes, now both glowing a feral crimson, fixed on her. The snarl was still on his lips, but a sliver of confusion tempered the rage. Why? The beast's voice rumbled, a strange hybrid of Zephyros's cadence and a guttural growl. Why do you not run? Because no one should have to suffer alone, Aerith answered, her gaze unwavering. For a long moment, the creature simply stared. The shadowy tendrils that made up its shifting form seemed to still, listening. The oppressive aura of pain in the room lessened by a fraction. It was as if her words, her simple presence, were a balm on a festering wound. The change was minuscule, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Slowly, painfully, the transformation began to reverse. The shadows receded, bones snapping back into place with sickening crunches. Zephyros collapsed onto the stone floor. His human form returned, though he was pale and shaking, drenched in a cold sweat. The chains hung loosely on him now. He lay there, panting, his head turned toward her. The crimson glow was gone from his eye, leaving only the weary gray of the king. How? He rasped, his voice raw. No one! Nothing has ever pushed it back before, not even for a moment. I just talked, she said, her own knees feeling weak with relief. It was more than that, he said, pushing himself up into a sitting position. He looked at her with a new intensity, a calculating intelligence that was far more intimidating than the beast's rage. Who are you, wolfless girl? Before she could answer, the heavy door creaked open. Lord Elrican stood on the threshold, flanked by his guards. He took in the scene, the exhausted king, the unbroken Omega, and a flicker of deep displeasure crossed his face before he masked it with a concerned frown. Zephyros, my dear nephew, are you well? We heard the roars. I feared the worst. His eyes slid to Aerith, cold and sharp. And you are still alive. How unexpected. She is under my protection, uncle, Zephyros said, his voice regaining some of its regal strength. He did not try to stand, but his presence filled the room nonetheless. She will remain here. Of course, Elrican said smoothly, though his eyes narrowed. Whatever brings you comfort, but a wolfless Omega, it is an embarrassment, the court whispers. They say you are so far gone you cling to a broken creature for solace. Let them whisper, Zephyros replied, his gaze locked with his uncle's. Their words are wind. She stays. Elrican gave a tight, thin-lipped smile. As you wish, your majesty. He turned to Aerith. See that you continue to be useful. The king's favor is a fickle thing. With a final, lingering look that was both a warning and a threat, he swept from the room, the door closing behind him. The sound of the locks being fastened echoed once more, sealing Aerith inside her strange new prison. She was no longer just a sacrifice. She was a curiosity, a potential solution, and to a man like Lord Elrican, that made her something far more dangerous, a problem to be eliminated. Days bled into a strange routine within the confines of the king's tower. Aerith was given simple servants' quarters adjoining Zephyros's main chamber, a small mercy that allowed her a sliver of privacy. Food was brought by silent guards who refused to meet her eyes. She was a ghost in the citadel, her existence known only to a few. Her purpose, however, became clearer with each passing day. She was an anchor for the king. When the tremors of the curse began, when the shadow veins darkened on his skin, she would speak to him. She would sit, just out of his reach, and fill the oppressive silence with stories. She told him of market days, of the changing seasons, of the mythology of the goddess and the great wolf. She spun tales from memory and imagination, weaving tapestries of words to distract him from his own inner war. And it worked. The full transformations became less frequent. The periods of lucidity, of calm, grew longer. Zephyros began to speak back. At first, his questions were curt, impersonal. He asked about the state of the kingdom, the harvest, the morale of the people. He was a king, starved for his duties. Areth answered what she could, piecing together gossip and news she had overheard in her previous life. Then, his questions became more personal. "Why did your family cast you out?" he asked one evening. He was sitting on the edge of his stone dais. The chains pooled around his ankles. He had refused to let the guards remove them completely, a grim reminder of the beast that still slept within. Orith hesitated, the old shame stinging her. "I am wolfless," she said simply. "To them, I was a blight on our bloodline, a failure. Failure is being unable to protect your people," Zephyros countered, his voice low. "Failure is being chained to a rock, while your kingdom withers under the hand of a man like my uncle. Your condition is a circumstance of birth, not a measure of your worth." His words were a revelation. No one had ever spoken of her condition with anything other than pity or disgust. To have the Alpha King, a man revered for his strength, dismiss the very thing that had defined her as worthless, it shifted something fundamental inside her. She found her courage. "Why do you let him rule in your stead? Lord Aelrican, he does not have the people's best interests at heart." A dark look crossed Zephyros's face. "Aelrican is ambitious and cruel, but he holds the council. While I am like this," he gestured to his chains, to the shadow-stained skin, "my claim is fragile. Many believe I am no longer fit to rule. They would see me put down like a rabid dog. Aelrican maintains order, even if it is a cold and oppressive one. He is the devil, I know. He sent me here to die," Orith stated quietly. "I know," Zephyros said, his gray eye meeting hers. "And for that, he will answer to me, when I am free." The promise in his voice was absolute. In that moment, he was not a monster. He was her king, and a strange, tentative bond was forming between them, spun from shared solitude and whispered secrets in the dark. He began to see past the wolfless Omega and saw Orith, a woman of quiet strength and surprising resilience. And she, in turn, saw past the cursed beast to the noble, tormented man trapped within. This fragile peace, however, was not destined to last. One afternoon, Lord Aelrican came to the tower again. This time, he did not address the king. He came straight to Areth, who was mending one of Zephyros's old tunics. "The court grows restless," Aelrican said, his voice a venomous whisper. He circled her like a predator. "They speak of the king's miraculous improvement, and they speak your name, the wolfless witch who has ensnared our tormented monarch." "I am no witch," Areth said, keeping her hands steady on her sewing. "No? Then what are you?" he sneered. "You are a nobody, a disgrace, and you are interfering with the natural course of things." He leaned closer, his voice dropping. "The king's curse is a judgment from the goddess. It must run its course. Your presence here is a blasphemy. End it. Fail in your duties. Let the beast take him. It would be a mercy for him and a reward for you." He pressed a small, heavy pouch into her hand. It jingled with the sound of gold. "Leave the citadel," he hissed. "Disappear, and you will live out your days in comfort. Defy me, and I will expose you as a charlatan and a spy." I will have you burned. Arith's hand closed around the pouch. The gold was cold and hard against her skin. She looked from Aelricin's cruel face to the shadowed corner where Zephyros sat, watching, listening, his expression unreadable. For the first time in her life, she had something to protect. Something more valuable than gold or her own safety. She met Aelricin's gaze, her own clear and defiant. No. She let the pouch of gold drop to the floor, the coins scattering across the stones with a final, ringing sound. Aelricin's face contorted into a mask of pure fury. You have made a grave mistake, little Omega. From the corner, a low growl echoed, and the chains rattled ominously. Aelricin took a half-step back, his eyes darting toward the king. Zephyros was on his feet, the shadows writhing around him, his gray eye blazing with a cold, protective fire. "Get out!" the king commanded, his voice deadly quiet. "And do not threaten what is mine again." His plans shattered, but his hatred for Orith now cemented into something lethal. The night after Aelricin's threat was different. A storm raged outside the citadel, mirroring the tempest inside the king's soul. The curse was fighting back, angered by the progress Zephyros had made, by the hope Orith had kindled. The pain was more intense than she had ever seen it. Zephyros thrashed against his chains, his roars of agony shaking the very foundations of the tower. Her stories were not working. Her soothing words were swallowed by the storm of his suffering. The shadows were consuming him, faster and more completely than ever before. He was losing. "Orith!" he choked out, his voice a desperate plea from within the rising tide of darkness. "Get back. It's too strong this time." His body convulsed, bones snapping and reforming with horrifying speed. The transformation was absolute. Where the king had been, now stood the shadow beast. It was larger than a dire wolf, a creature of nightmare made solid. Its fur was shifting shadow, its claws were obsidian razors, and its eyes burned like twin coals from hell. The silver chains, weakened by countless assaults, strained and then snapped, the links flying across the room like shrapnel. The beast was free. Arith was frozen, not with fear, but with a terrible, aching sorrow. This was the monster everyone feared, the creature that had slain guards and ripped Omegas to shreds. It took a step toward her, its massive head low, a guttural snarl vibrating in its chest. The room was filled with its predatory scent, a mixture of ozone, blood, and ancient magic. This was it. This was the death Aelricin had promised her. But as the beast loomed over her, its shadow falling across her like a shroud, she saw something in its burning eyes. Beneath the feral rage, she saw the flicker she had sensed before, the trapped soul, the agony of Zephyros, a prisoner in his own monstrous form. The beast was not just a killer. It was a cage of suffering. It opened its jaws, revealing rows of shadow-forged teeth. A blast of hot, foul air washed over her. It was going to end it. Instead of screaming, instead of running, Orith did the most irrational thing she had ever done in her life. She raised a trembling hand. The beast paused, its head cocked, clearly not expecting this. "Zephyros," she whispered, her voice shaking but clear. "I am not afraid of you. I see you." She reached out and placed her palm flat against the creature's massive, shadowy snout. The moment her skin touched its form, a jolt, like lightning, shot up her arm. The beast recoiled with a yelp of what sounded like pained surprise. But it did not attack. It stood frozen, its burning eyes wide, fixed on her hand. Arith did not pull back. She held her ground, channeling every ounce of her strange, empathic gift into her touch. She did not try to fight the darkness. She tried to reach the man inside it. She flooded the connection with her own quiet strength, with her unwavering belief in the king he was, with the fragile, budding affection she felt for him. The shadow flesh beneath her palm felt like solid ice and burning fire all at once. The beast let out a low whine, a sound of utter confusion and pain. The raging inferno in its eyes began to dim. For a breathtaking second, the monstrous form flickered, and she saw Zephyros's face superimposed over the beast's, his eyes filled with shock and a dawning, incredulous hope. He had felt her. He had felt her touch not as an attack, but as an anchor. The effort was immense. It felt like she was trying to hold back the tide with her bare hands. The darkness fought her, a sentient, hateful force that recoiled from her light. But she held on, pouring more and more of herself into the connection, with a final, soul-shattering howl that was equal parts rage and relief. The beast collapsed. The shadows imploded, dissolving into smoke and whispers, leaving Zephyros lying naked and unconscious on the cold stone floor, completely human. The writhing black veins were gone, his skin pale but clear. For the first time since she had arrived, he looked peaceful. Areth fell to her knees, panting, the adrenaline leaving her weak and trembling. She had faced the monster and survived. More than that, she had touched the man inside and pulled him back from the brink. She crawled over to him, her heart aching. She gently brushed a strand of black hair from his face. He was no longer just her king or her captor. He was Zephyros, and she was terrifyingly, hopelessly falling for him. Zephyros awoke slowly, the familiar ache of the curse's aftermath, a dull thrum in his bones. But something was different. The gnawing, ever-present torment at the back of his mind, the whisper of the beast, was silent, truly silent. For the first time in years, he opened his eyes. Areth was asleep in a chair she had dragged near him, a worn blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Her face, so often tense with worry, was soft in slumber. He remembered the chaos, the pain, the absolute certainty that this time the beast would win. He remembered the chains breaking, and then he remembered her small, defiant figure standing before the monster, her whispered words, her hand. He remembered the shock of her touch, not a brand of pain or fear, but a cool, soothing balm that had pierced through the layers of rage and agony to the core of him. It had been like a drowning man finding a single breath of air. He pushed himself up, his muscles protesting. He was weak, but he was clear. He was whole. He looked at his hands, his arms. The shadow veins were gone, not faded, not dormant, gone. A staggering realization hit him. She had done more than push the beast back. She had healed him. Perhaps not permanently, but she had mended a part of his shattered soul. He stood and walked over to her, his movements silent. He looked down at the Omega, who was supposed to be a sacrifice, a broken toy. She was none of those things. She was a weapon, a miracle, a woman with a power no one had understood, a power that had given him hope. As if sensing his presence, her eyes fluttered open. They were the color of warm honey, and for a moment they were unguarded, filled with a deep and startling emotion that made his breath catch. "You're all right," she breathed, relief washing over her features. "Because of you," he said, his voice rough. He knelt before her, taking her hand. It was so small in his. "Areth, what you did, how?" "I don't know," she admitted, her gaze dropping to their joined hands. I saw you were in there. I wanted to help." "You did more than help," he said, his thumb stroking the back of her hand. "You saved me." He had to know the truth of the curse, to understand what he was fighting. Now, he had to share it with her. She was no longer just a tribute. She was a part of this battle. "The curse," he began, his voice low and grim. "It was cast by the Witch Queen of the Cinder Peaks in the moment of my death. When the warlocks resurrected me, the curse came back with my spirit. It's called the Shadow Blight because it feeds on shadow, on my pain, my anger, my isolation. It grows stronger the more I am cut off from my pack, from my kingdom, from myself." He met her eyes, the vulnerability in his own a stark admission. The witch told me it could only be broken by an act of true belonging. To find a place, a person, where my soul felt truly anchored. How could I find that? Chained in a tower, feared by everyone as a monster. I thought it was impossible. A cruel joke to ensure my eternal torment. He paused, his grip on her hand tightening slightly. "But when you touched the beast, when you looked at my monstrous form and were not afraid, for a second, I felt it, a connection, an anchor. It felt like belonging." Orith's eyes widened, filled with a dawning understanding and something else, something deeper. The air between them crackled with unspoken emotion. The protector and the protected, the king and the outcast, their roles had blurred and inverted until they were simply a man and a woman, bound by a shared, desperate fight for survival. "I will not leave you," she said, her voice filled with a fierce conviction that belied her Omega status. "We will fight this together." It was a vow, a promise made in the heart of the Citadel's highest tower. But even as the words were spoken, an external threat was already in motion. Far below, in the council chambers, Lord Aelrican was putting the final pieces of his own plan into place. He had seen Aurith's power through the scrying mirrors he used to monitor the king. He had seen the beast calmed, the curse recede. The Omega was not a problem anymore. She was a genuine threat to his ascension. He could no longer wait for the curse to do his work for him. He would have to accelerate the process. He would push the king into a permanent state of madness, frame the Omega for the crime, and seize the throne in the ensuing chaos. He picked up a small, lead-lined vial from his desk. Inside was a viscous, dark liquid, a potent blend of concentrated wolfsbane and a magical accelerant designed to enrage the Shadow Blight beyond all control. It was time to kill a king and a queen in the making with a single, poisoned stone. The next morning brought a false sense of peace. For the first time, Zephyros allowed the guards to remove his chains completely. He walked his chambers a free man, albeit one still confined to a tower. He and Orith spoke for hours, planning, hoping. They spoke of a future where he was healed, where he could retake his throne, and she could stand by his side. A fragile, impossible dream that felt tantalizingly close. Their quiet world was shattered when a royal page arrived bearing a tray. It held a single, ornate goblet. "From Lord Aelrican, Your Majesty," the page announced, his head bowed. "A draught of fortified wine, to celebrate your continued recovery." Zephyros's eyes narrowed. He trusted his uncle as much as he would a starving wolf, but to refuse the gift publicly would be an insult, a sign of weakness that Aelrican would surely exploit. "Leave it," Zephyros commanded. The page set the tray down and scurried away. Orith looked at the goblet, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. "You can't drink that." "I know," Zephyros said. His gaze was distant, calculating. "But my uncle is not a fool. He knows I would be suspicious. This is a move in a game I do not yet understand." He picked up the goblet, swirling the deep red liquid. He sniffed it. There was no scent of poison his keen senses could detect. Wolfsbane, especially when masked by magic, could be nearly impossible to identify until it was too late. He was trapped. To drink it was a potential death sentence. To refuse it was to show fear, to cede a piece of power to his enemy. Before he could make a decision, a commotion erupted outside the door. Shouts. A clash of steel. The door burst open and a guard stumbled in, his face pale with panic. "My king! The lower levels! There's an attack! Rebels in the dungeons! They've freed the prisoners!" Zephyros's head snapped up, his kingly instincts overriding everything else. It was a classic pincer move, create a crisis to distract from the true attack. Aelrican was making his move. "He's trying to divide my loyal guards," Zephyros snarled. "It's a feint." But even as he said it, a tremor ran through him. A sharp, searing pain lanced through his veins. He looked down at his hand, the one holding the goblet. A thin, almost invisible needle, coated in the dark poison, had been embedded in the filigree of the cup's stem. It had pricked his finger, a tiny, insignificant wound that had delivered a fatal dose. He dropped the goblet, which shattered on the floor. "Aerith, run!" he gasped as the poison hit him like a physical blow. It was instantaneous and brutal. The wolfsbane attacked his shifter physiology, while the accelerant ignited the dormant curse. The shadow veins erupted across his skin, blacker and more virulent than ever. He roared, a sound of pure, unadulterated agony, and fell to his knees. This was not a transformation. This was a war inside his body. The poison and the curse, tearing him apart from the inside out. The shadow beast erupted from him, not as a controlled change, but as an explosion of dark energy. It was a mindless, rabid thing, driven by the poison's fire and the curse's amplified rage. Its only instinct was to destroy. At that exact moment, Lord Aelrican himself appeared in the doorway, flanked by a dozen of his own personal guards, men loyal to his coin, not the crown. "Behold," Aelrican cried, his voice ringing with false horror for the benefit of any onlookers. "The king has finally succumbed. The beast is unleashed. And look!" He pointed a dramatic finger at Aerith. "The Omega Witch has poisoned him to seize control. There is the shattered goblet. Arrest her! Put the monster out of its misery!" His guards advanced, spears leveled. They were creating a circle, trapping Aerith with the raging, mindless beast. Aelrican's plan was perfect. The beast would kill Aerith, and his guards would kill the beast. He would be seen as the savior of the Citadel, the reluctant hero forced to put down his mad nephew. The beast, roaring in agony, turned its burning eyes on the closest thing to it. Aerith. It saw only a target for its pain. It lunged. Time seemed to slow to a crawl. The monstrous form of the shadow beast, all shadow and teeth and mindless fury, filled Aerith's vision. There was nowhere to run. The guards formed a wall of spears behind her, their faces grim and resolved. In front of her was the monster Zephyros had become, a creature beyond reason, beyond her reach. She closed her eyes, bracing for the impact, for the tearing of claws and the end of everything. But it never came. Instead, she heard a sickening crunch and a human grunt of pain. Her eyes flew open. Zephyros was standing between her and the beast. It was impossible. The beast was a physical manifestation of the curse. It should not have been separate from him. Yet here he was, in his human form, though he looked like a wraith. He was translucent, shimmering like a heat haze, his form barely holding together. He had somehow torn his spirit free from the rampaging monster, a feat of will that was actively killing him. His translucent hand was pressed against the beast's chest, holding it back. The monster snarled and swiped, its shadowy claws passing right through his ghostly form, yet he held it at bay. "I will not let you hurt her," his spirit voice echoed in the room, faint and strained. It was his ultimate choice. With his body being destroyed by poison, and his wolf turned into a mindless engine of destruction, he had used the last of his will, the very essence of his soul, to shield her. Protecting the forgotten Omega was more important than his own survival, more important than his life, his crown, his very soul. This was his act of true belonging. Elrican stared, his jaw agape in disbelief. What sorcery is this? Kill them both. But as the guards hesitated, awestruck by the impossible sight, Oreth understood. He had chosen her. He had anchored his soul to her. And in that moment, something inside her, something that had been dormant and silent her entire life, answered his call. A warmth spread from her chest, a feeling like the first sun of spring after a long, hard winter. It was a power she never knew she possessed. The full, untapped force of her empathic soul, awakened by his sacrifice. Love, fierce and absolute, flooded through her. She didn't run from the beast. She ran to Zephyros's shimmering, fading spirit. "No!" she cried, her voice ringing with a newfound power. "You will not die!" She threw her arms around his ghostly form, and as she did, she pushed past him, past the barrier of his spirit, and came face to face with the monster. It roared in her face, its breath a vortex of cold despair. She did not hesitate. She rose on her toes, reached up, and pressed her lips to the place where the beast's mouth would be. She kissed the monster. It was not a soft, romantic gesture. It was an act of war. She poured all of herself into that kiss, her love, her hope, her defiance, her soul's own light. It was a direct assault on the curse itself, her pure, untainted empathy. The very essence of her soft power met the ancient, hateful magic of the Shadow Blight head-on. For a second, there was only silence. Then, light exploded from their point of contact, a brilliant, blinding golden light that threw everyone in the room back. It was not a fire that burned, but a light that healed, that purified. The shadow beast shrieked, a sound of dissolving hate, as the light consumed it, broke it apart, and burned it into nothingness. The light coalesced, flowing back into Zephyros's spirit form, and then into his physical body, which lay crumpled on the floor. It sealed the wound of the curse, purged the wolfsbane from his veins, and rekindled the dying embers of his life force. The light faded, leaving the room in a stunned, ringing silence. Zephyros lay on the floor, no longer poisoned, no longer cursed. The shadow veins were gone forever. He was simply himself. As he took a deep, shuddering breath, a new light began to glow around him and Oreth. It was a soft, golden aura, a visible manifestation of a bond snapping into place, ancient and unbreakable. The mating bond. On Oreth's neck, just below her ear, a mark began to form. Not a bite, but an elegant swirl of golden light that settled into her skin like a tattoo, the mark of the Luna Queen. Lord Elrican stared, his face a mask of horror and utter defeat. His perfect plan had not just failed. It had created the one thing he had sought to prevent, a healed, powerful king, and a queen by his side whose power was beyond his comprehension. Zephyros's eyes opened. They were clear, both of them the color of a calm storm. He looked at Oreth, and his gaze was filled with a love and reverence that was as bright as the light that had just saved them. "Mate," he breathed, and the world realigned itself around that single word. The royal guard, the ones loyal to the crown, finally broke through the blockade in the lower levels and stormed the tower room. They found a scene of utter confusion. Lord Elrican's personal guards looking stunned, Elrican himself pale with fury, and in the center of it all, their king, alive and whole, getting to his feet. Beside him stood the Omega tribute, a glowing golden mark adorning her neck. "Seize him!" Zephyros commanded, his voice no longer strained by pain, but ringing with the absolute authority of the Alpha King. He pointed a single steady finger at his uncle. "Lord Aelricon is a traitor to the crown. He attempted to murder his king and usurp the throne." Aelricon's guards, mercenaries bought with coin, looked from the powerless regent to the radiant, undeniably powerful king. Their loyalty evaporated in an instant. They dropped their weapons. The royal guard swarmed forward, clapping Aelricon in irons before he could utter a single word of protest. His reign of cold ambition was over. Zephyros paid the chaos no mind. He had eyes only for Orith. He crossed the room in 2 long strides and cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle, reverent. "You saved me," he murmured, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones. "You saved us all. You saved me first," she whispered back, her heart feeling too large for her chest. The golden bond between them pulsed with warmth, a constant, comforting presence. It was a connection that went deeper than words, a perfect understanding that flowed between their souls. In that moment, something shifted within her. The silent, empty space inside her where her wolf should have been suddenly sparked with life. It was not the savage, demanding presence of an alpha or beta wolf. It was something different. A gentle, steady warmth, like the roots of an ancient tree, awakening from a long slumber. Her wolf was not gone. It had been waiting for him, waiting for her to become whole. Zephyros felt it through their new bond. His eyes widened. "Your wolf," she nodded, a slow, wondrous smile spreading across her face. She was no longer broken. She was complete. Days later, the great hall of the citadel was packed with the lords and ladies of the shifter world. They had been summoned by their returned king. Whispers filled the hall. They spoke of the traitor Aelricon languishing in the dungeons. They spoke of the king's miraculous recovery. Most of all, they spoke of the wolfless Omega, who was now never seen away from his side, a mysterious golden mark on her neck. Zephyros strode into the hall, not in armor, but in the simple black robes of his office. He radiated a calm, confident power that silenced the crowd instantly. He looked every inch the king they had lost and mourned. Orith walked beside him, her head held high. She was no longer the frightened girl on the auction block. She was the mate of the Alpha King. "My loyal subjects," Zephyros began, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "You have been told that I was sick, that a curse held me in its thrall. This was true, but the time of shadows is over." He turned and took Orith's hand, drawing her forward. "You have also been told that this woman is a wolfless Omega, a broken thing of no value. This was a lie." He lifted their joined hands. "This is Orith, my mate, my queen, and your savior." It was her strength that broke the curse, her courage that exposed the traitor in our midst, her power, a power not of claw and fang but of heart and soul, that has healed your king. A murmur of disbelief and wonder rippled through the assembled nobles. "Our laws, our traditions, have taught us to value only one kind of strength," Zephyros continued, his voice resonating with passion. "We have discarded those we deemed weak. We have shamed those who are different. We have allowed fear and prejudice to rule us. No more. Today marks a new era. Compassion is not a weakness. Empathy is a weapon. And love," his eyes found Orith's, and the entire hall seemed to fade away for him, "is the most powerful magic of all." He raised her hand to his lips and kissed it, a public declaration of his devotion. In that moment, the wolfless Omega became the most powerful woman in the kingdom, not because of the king she stood beside, but because of the strength she had found within herself. She had not only freed the king, she had freed them all from the prison of their own prejudice. The reign of the Shadow Blight was over, and the dawn of the Luna Queen had begun. 1 year later, the Blackwood Citadel was no longer a place of shadow. Sunlight streamed through newly installed glass windows, illuminating halls that now echoed with laughter instead of fear. The oppressive tapestries depicting war had been replaced with vibrant scenes of harvest, community, and peace. The kingdom was thriving under the joint rule of its king and queen. King Zephyros stood on the high balcony of the tower that had once been his prison. The chains were long gone, melted down, and reforged into the new gates of a sanctuary. Aurith had founded a home for outcast Omegas, and any shifter who had been deemed broken by the old, harsh society. It was the most popular institution in the capital. He was no longer the tormented king. The curse had left scars on his soul, but they were reminders of a battle won, not a life lost. He ruled with a wisdom and compassion that had been forged in the fires of his own suffering. A pair of arms wrapped around his waist from behind. He smiled and leaned back into Arith's embrace, covering her hands with his own. "Thinking grim thoughts, my love?" she murmured, resting her cheek against his back. "Remembering," he corrected softly, "remembering the darkness, so I never take the light for granted." He turned in her arms to face her, his Luna Queen. Her honey-colored eyes shone with love and a quiet confidence that had fully blossomed. Her wolf, a rare and legendary Heartwood spirit, known for its intuitive ability to heal and nurture the pack's collective soul, was a calm, steady presence within her, perfectly complementing his own powerful alpha spirit. His gaze dropped to the gentle swell of her belly, and his hand came to rest there possessively. "And how is our little prince feeling today?" he asked, his voice softening. "He has your kick," Aurith laughed. "I think he's practicing for the Royal Guard trials already." Zephyros chuckled, a deep, happy sound that would have been unimaginable a year ago. He leaned down and pressed a tender kiss to her lips. "I never thought this was possible. A life without pain, a family, a future. It was always possible," she said, her hand covering his on her stomach. "You just needed someone to show you the way out of the dark." Their mating bond pulsed between them, a silent, constant song of their love. Below them, in the courtyard, children of all ranks, Alpha, Beta, and Omega, played together. The rigid hierarchy that had ruled their society for centuries was beginning to dissolve, replaced by a new philosophy of mutual respect, one that valued all forms of strength. It was a kingdom reborn, all because of a forgotten Omega, whose greatest power was the ability to see the man inside the monster. Her kiss had not only broken his curse and bound him to her forever, it had freed an entire nation and bound them all together in a new and brighter age. He pulled her close, breathing in the scent of his mate, his queen, his home, and knew with absolute certainty that his act of true belonging had not been a single moment of sacrifice, but a lifetime he now had the privilege of spending by her side.